Back here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on ESPN Radio 94.1. Matt Hatfield here with you. Pleased to be joined by a special guest. He is the play-by-play voice for the University of Virginia Cavaliers, director of broadcasting there too. Follow him on Twitter at Wahoo Voice as the Cavaliers get ready to play host to number 15 ranked North Carolina, 8 o'clock Eastern at Scott Stadium. We say hello to Dave Koehn here on ESPN Radio 94.1. Dave, thanks for joining us. Only 2 more months of this crazy 2020 year to go. How you been?
I'm doing fine, man. Then we get to figure out what 2021 holds in store. So careful what you wish for.
Yeah, it's been a wild year for sure. And let's start off first here with, UNC comes in 4-1, visiting Scott Stadium tonight. Virginia at 1-4, trying to get their first win of the month of October to snap this 4-game losing skid before the calendar turns to November. As you look at this matchup, big picture, North Carolina's dropped the last 3 to UVA. Does recent series, history factor into the equation at all, or is it mostly irrelevant here in the case of the 2020 Who's and Heels?
Yeah, I think that this is a unique year in so many ways, and I think typically that's the case when teams meet up. I mean, yeah, there's some level of history between teams, but I don't think that this one runs deep enough. I think when you go back to, Virginia versus Virginia Tech, when the Cavaliers were struggling year in and year out to beat the Hokies, I think that fed into these games one year after the other. I don't know about in this series, though. I think with Carolina, this is a different team. It's a different Virginia team, and it's a really good Carolina team. I mean, that's the sobering part of this, I think, from Virginia's perspective, is one of the areas that Virginia has really struggled this year, which is surrendering big plays with a banged-up secondary. I think Virginia comes into this game tonight 98th out of 101 teams, last in the league in giving up plays of 20 yards plus, and Carolina comes in number 8 in the country in that category offensively. So that's been a real problem area with some young guys having to fill in some spots, and I suspect that'll be the case in this game again.
Are you more encouraged that UVA solved its first quarter woes a week ago? It was 7-7 after one against Miami, or that they kept the game with the Miami team that was ranked in the top 15 in the country, like North Carolina is, tight to the very end, only falling 19-14, where they outscored them in the fourth quarter, and statistically, it was the best showing all year from the standpoint of points they gave up for this defense.
Yeah, I think to me the thing I'm most encouraged by was the fact that they got after the quarterback again. They brought some of that havoc, which is really, really central to this defense. The way it's designed, you just can't have games where you don't have tackles for loss and you don't have sacks. And Virginia had 5 of those last week against Miami, and then they had 11 tackles for loss. So that was critical. And I think the fact that this team continues to show resolve, but to me, one of the real problem areas, though, has been that Virginia has had to play from behind as much as they have. And now some of that is due to the fact that the competition they're going against, like, this is easily lost. But, in fact, it was somewhat lost on me until someone pointed it out. But Virginia's opposing record, teams that they played through this weekend, when you consider the 6 opponents, have gone a collective 22-6 going into the weekend. I mean, that's a murderer's row of a schedule. So there's a reason Virginia's been trailing in a lot of these games. But, that said, they have been better than they've shown. And I think when you're playing from behind, 92% of the time, as Virginia has been this season, they've only had the lead 8% of these games. And when you're playing from behind that regularly, I just think it puts you in a position where you're more apt to be predictable and you're apt to make mistakes. So, yeah, getting behind the 8 ball early in that first quarter has been a real bugaboo for the Cavaliers, and I think it would serve Virginia very well to find a way to start faster tonight.
We'll sink our teeth into defending this powerful UNC offense, putting up nearly 40 points per game, the quarterback situation, the injury update in a moment. But I want to hit on a player. You've been doing all these different interviews around the ACC and the country here, David. Name you probably haven't been asked about a lot here, and he's from the 757. He's kind of a feel-good story for us here. Richard Burney, I think he's 6th or 7th on the team in tackles, has a couple of sacks. The 6'4", 275-pound defensive end, senior out of Hickory High School in Chesapeake. Wasn't sure if he'd be a tight end or defensive end when he got there to Charlottesville. Didn't see the field all that much before last season, but he's getting a chance to contribute, and he could be a key guy tonight.
Yeah, Uncle Burn, as his teammates call him, because he's the old gray hair amongst that crew, really. I mean, you consider a guy in his 6th season now playing, and the crazy part is the thing, I don't know if he'd ever do it or not. I tried to pin him on it, he wouldn't give me an answer, but whether he consider coming back for year 7 next year, he could conceivably do that with the rule in terms of allowing guys to come back. I mean, if he wanted to. Now, 7 years is a long time in one place, but Yeah, it's been fun to watch his growth, and I think he is a steady presence for this guy. He's one of just two guys this year wearing that black jersey, and for Virginia, that's measure in terms of what you've been able to do in the weight room and all of those types of things. So that's the highest honor in terms of the off-season conditioning for this group, and he's been a tremendous worker for this group, and it has been fun to see him, have a chance to shine here in the late going through his career after having to go through a season where he missed 10 games due to that medical condition, and it's been fun to see him get to shine. But yeah, I think he's a big part of that havoc I was talking about. He's a guy that's got to find a way to get to the quarterback. If you can do it without sending a big blitz, man, what a difference it makes. And Bernie's a part of that on that defensive line is the minimal rush of three. Sometimes Virginia last week, we look at the Miami game, they found a way to get after the quarterback with that minimal rush. And I think players like Bernie are a big part of why.
We're talking with Dave Koehn, the play-by-play voice for UVA here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk. Here, Dave and Tony Covington on the Virginia Sports Radio Network. Give you the call of the Cavaliers playing host to number 15 ranked North Carolina, an 8 o'clock Eastern kick this evening. It's ESPN Radio 94.1. And Dave, the quarterback situation. We've seen a lot of Armstrong. We know Thompson's been playing other spots, mostly due to the shoulder deal. You got Stone there too. Probably a good chance we see at least multiple quarterbacks, maybe all three of them play.
Yeah, and don't forget about Ira Armstead.
Yeah.
He's the fourth. So I don't think you'll probably see Stone play in a game like this just because I don't think Lindell brings much to the table that Brennan doesn't. And in fact, to that point, Brennan Armstrong is a tremendous threat to run the football, too. It's not as though he's a statue back there. But obviously, amongst all those guys, he's the most refined in terms of throwing the football and his ability to stretch the defense with some long throws, too. So I'm excited about Brennan Armstrong and what his potential is. Now, again, he's still young. But I just like the mentality he brings. I think he's a natural leader. I think he's an athlete, and I think he's gritty and tough. Those are all things you love to have from your quarterback. But the part you mentioned about, Keaton Thompson and even Ira Armstead, the two more really running-oriented quarterbacks, I think that they have brought a nice change of pace, though. For whatever reason, Virginia's moved the ball pretty darn well since they started doing this for a ground attack that has struggled at times to get going. But the last 2 weeks, they went over 200 yards 2 weeks ago against Wake Forest, and they were just under 200 yards last week against Miami, and I think some of that's attributable to the fact that you had some of those other guys carrying the ball like Keaton Thompson and Ira Armstead. Armstead's got tremendous speed. Now, that's a kid that you talk to the coaches, they'll tell you they think he's got speed very similar to what Bryce Perkins did. What he doesn't have is, the experience in the system and an understanding of the offense to really be able to take a game over. But I think he's another one that could be down the road an exciting player for Virginia fans to watch.
Give us the injury update, in particular the safeties there, Joey Blunt, Brenton Nelson. Expect those guys to play, or is it going to be very iffy?
Yeah, I'd say probably the latter. I don't know this for a fact, but I don't know. I think I'd be surprised to see him go, but you never know, and it is a hit for this Virginia defense, no question about it. Those are two guys that are playmakers in that secondary, and not having them there against a team that is as talented, both throwing and running the ball as Carolina is, that's a tough hit. And I think that Virginia's just going to have to find a way. But, again, like I say, their coaches feel a little bit, I think, significantly better about their depth there than they have in the past. But you're still asking young players to step into a very big role on a big stage against a very good offense, one of the top offenses in college football this year.
Last one on the football front to finish up with some basketball with you, Dave, and appreciate the time as always. Defensively, it's a big challenge, whether it's defending the deep strike with Sam Howell and those wide receivers, De'Ami Brown, Daz Newsome, or even neutralizing the run game of UNC. Have you, in conversations for prepping for this game, speaking with the Virginia coaches, Bronco Mendenhall and his staff, do you get a sense they're going to try to take some of what Florida State did from its first half, or do you not even incorporate that because personnel's different? Kind of give me your feel on that.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about replicating what Florida State did, I have not had that conversation with them yet this week in terms of, are you able to do that? You're obviously a different team than Florida State. Florida State has, say what you will about that Seminole team and some of their struggles, they've got playmakers and they have got athletes. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that Virginia could use, candidly, in terms of its offense. I think it's one of the limiting factors for this team in the here and now is you don't necessarily have that guy to take the roof off. And I think, especially you miss Lavelle Davis, a freshman who Virginia's come to rely on, but it looks like he's probably going to be out again this week as well. And so you don't have him. You lost Dontavian Wicks before the season even started with an ACL surgery. He was another receiver that could take the top off. And So, I do think that is something Virginia misses, is that ability that Bryce Perkins gave you a year ago, where on a given play, it could go the distance. And it does force this Virginia offense to have to work a lot longer. And I think by doing so, you put yourself in a position where you're more subjected to making mistakes and turnovers because you're running so many more plays. I mean, it's just the odds bear it out. So, on the other side of that coin, though, I do think from Virginia's perspective, one of the best keys in defenses can be keeping that Carolina offense off the field. And that's where some long, sustained drives could really prove to be really impactful, but you just got to finish those drives. That's something Virginia hasn't done a great job of this year.
As we turn our attention to basketball here, Dave, I mean, what's the expectation for the college hoops season, and do you see UVA being in ACC title contention, which as a result would put them once again in the national championship conversation?
Yeah, I think that the expectations are the very top again this year. I think Virginia's in that spectrum again. So, I know Virginia fans are incredibly excited, and I am too, to see Sam Hauser play. He's the transfer from Marquette. He and his brother both left Marquette 2 years ago, had to sit last year, but in practice, this guy was one of the best. I mean, he's just composed. He's gritty. He's tough. He can shoot the heck out of it. And, he's a guy at 6 feet 8 inches in height that's going to be a tough cover. And, a Virginia team, as we saw, that has good shooting 2 years ago is a handful. And so, with Koehn Clark back, boy, this guy was like a senior when he was a freshman. So now in his third year in the program at point guard, with some weapons around him, and not only Sam Hauser, but Jay Huff's a guy who's starting to turn it on. There's just a lot of weapons when you look at even Thomas Wolde-Tensai, what he was able to do last year is a transfer started to really turn it on and show that he could get hot in a hurry. And then you've got one of the best recruiting classes, I think, from Virginia's perspective in a long time, with the guard and Reese Beekman coming in along with Jabri Abdur-Rahim. And, I think that Caden Shedrick, another redshirt freshman, is another name that people will get to know, and Carson McCorkle is the other freshman that's coming in as well. So some young faces that could, I think, probably provide some pop right out of the gate, especially if they're not asked to do too much. Now, is this team going to be as good defensively as a year ago? Probably not, but I think they're going to have a lot more in the way of fangs when it comes to offensive prowess.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Abdur-Rahim. Papa Sharif was a mighty good player there in the NBA with the then Vancouver Grizzlies and now play in Memphis. Last one for there, Dave. Is there almost a greater anticipation for someone like you for the beginning of hoops than football, given that there was no NCAA tournament this past year?
Yeah, anticipation, I think it's just such a weird year going in. I'll be honest with you, Matt. I mean, there's a little bit of a sense of kind of leery. I feel leery going into it because, there is such potential for this team and you just want them to be able to pull it off, but there's still so many questions, about how you're going to be able to execute this thing. And from our perspective, we're going to be doing things a lot different from what we've done in the past. We won't be sitting courtside in any of these venues this year. We won't be traveling to a number of these venues if it's a flight. So, we're going to be doing some of these games remote, like we did our first football game remote last week. And it's a different experience. So from a selfish perspective, I don't look forward to that part of it. But that said, it will be good to have that team out there. And, I think that they're going to be a good basketball team and a fun team to watch. So that'll be fun. And you just have your fingers crossed and kind of go into this thing with bated breath that they're able to pull this off. Because let's face it, basketball is different from football. The challenge for football is you had so many guys to worry about. But the challenge for basketball is you don't have many guys. Therefore, you don't have wiggle room if you come into a contact tracing situation where entire rosters could be held out for potentially weeks at a time. So, that's going to be interesting stuff to watch how it all is navigated.
Good point. So cautious optimism, probably a better way of couching it as opposed to excitement or anticipation.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate.
Yeah. He is the play-by-play voice for the University of Virginia, Dave Koehn. So kind to join us here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk. Catch him tonight, 8 o'clock, the kickoff between the Cavaliers and the 15th-ranked Tar Heels of North Carolina. Dave and Tony Covington on the Virginia Sports Radio Network. Always a pleasure, my friend. You stay safe, and we'll keep in touch, all right?
All right, thanks, Matt. Enjoyed it.